Our next speaker is Paul Stone. He is product strategist at FlowForma. FlowForma is our title sponsor. We thank and appreciate for their support. Paul uses his in-depth oil and gas sector experience to support FlowForma's clients in achieving serious savings and competitive advantage. Paul is committed to empowering citizen developers to rapidly digitize their processes and manage them smarter and faster without using any code. Paul will share his insights on process automation in oil and gas, seizing the growth potential in 2023. Over to you, Paul.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be aware of all the benefits that you can get from process automation. So just quickly, let's get going. And I already had an excellent introduction there. So my name is Paul Stone. I'm a product strategist at FlowForma. And without further ado, I'll move straight on to the next slide. So let me first of all give you a brief introduction to FlowForma, the company, and FlowForma, the product. So we're an award-winning business process automation tool that focuses on automating business processes where human beings are working together, collaborating to achieve a business goal. We've got over 200,000 users across the globe, working in many industries, including oil and gas, and working in different locations, primarily in EU, but also in the US and also in Asia Pac. We deliver a tool that gives you a 3-in-1 focus that allows you to capture data as you execute processes in your organization, and also handle the communications around that, so that it can generate documents. I could also manage documents and generate communications such as emails and so on that help that process move along as quickly as possible to generate productive gains for your organization. We're a cloud-based system. We operate inside Microsoft 365, and we have strong integration ability out to other third-party systems, including systems that are running on premises and running in different cloud environments. I'll go through that in more detail as we move along in the show. What we do is we empower oil and gas and energy companies to digitally transform using an intelligent business process automation tool. The way we do that is we allow you to digitize your own business processes using a no-code configuration approach, so that people within your organization can actually digitize the processes that they do carry out day to day. All it requires is a person who has knowledge of the business process, and then without any IT knowledge, they can actually configure the solution to execute those business processes repeatedly in a standardized way every day in their organization, generating significant productivity boosts. And why would you use a tool like this? Well, it's to help with a whole variety of processes within your organization. We can work with any scenario, and that includes debt reduction, overcoming skill shortages by increasing the productivity of your existing resources, transforming the business models that you operate on, interacting with your customers, interacting with your suppliers. All of this can be achieved using a digital process automation tool. There's lots of stats that we could present on the state of the oil and gas industry today and why process automation could help you. But we're going to focus on maybe one or two just to give you some illustration. So one of those is, the labor skill shortage at the moment. If you look at the recent Ernst & Young report about, how do you reshape when today's future may not be tomorrow's reality? What you can see from that, amidst all these stats that are presented, is that over 90% of companies that are currently automating or planning to automate work processes to address labor shortages. So there's a labor shortage challenge that's very evident in the industry today. And really, it's a big challenge, because how can you get hold of people that don't exist? How can you recruit people into roles when there simply isn't enough skills available in the marketplace? And one way of doing that is to focus on productivity, to make better use of the resources that you currently have, to try and allow them to carry out more work. And process automation is something that can really help with that, where you can drive processes to operate more efficiently in your organization and generate extra time that can be used to carry out other tasks. So process automation is a key area where people see an opportunity to address that labor skill shortage, essentially by making better use of the resources that they already have. So how can digitization help to alleviate the skill shortage? Well, they can reduce hiring delays by streamlining the automation of onboarding processes. So one thing that we find in almost every company that we speak to is that there's a weakness in the way they onboard new employees. Very few people, even people who have comprehensive HR management systems running in the background, very few people have applied automation to employee onboarding. And I think part of the reason for that is that for every company, the onboarding process is slightly different. So no two companies would have the same resource onboarding process. And therefore, there isn't a standard solution out there which welcomes the opportunity to use a flexible digital process automation solution like FlowForma to carry out the onboarding process to your needs and your requirements. Do things the way that you do them, right? But to introduce efficiencies and productivity improvements to that process by digitizing that process and making the system push that process along to ensure the resources are onboarded efficiently. One way as well is that one of the benefits that you get from process automation is that by adopting technology, the system itself is going to drive that process along. It's going to prompt people to participate and prompt people to complete tasks and also monitor the completion of those tasks. So as you're moving through the process, you can see where things are at any point in time, and you can find out if processes are stuck in bottlenecks and stuck with particular resources, let's say in the organization, or stuck at particular points where you can quickly see in real time the process is stuck and who has the ball, who currently is stalling that process, so that can be reminded to progress it. At the end of the day, you can also improve retention of existing staff. So one of the ways of addressing the skill shortage is not necessarily to hire new people, but to retain the ones that you already have. And introducing technology can really help with that. It increases staff morale, and you can use that same technology to poll staff to find out any staff issues that you may have in the organization. So the technology itself, as well as onboarding the resources into the company, can also help retain those resources by giving them a portal where they can interact with the organization and can submit feedback and so on the work that they're doing and the conditions that they're experiencing, etc. So all of this can be achieved using that one single tool to do not just onboarding, but also monitor the happiness of staff within the organization, helping with retention. One of the things that people will have noticed over the past couple of years is that the market in oil and gas is very volatile. Now, I'm not going to go through all the events that have happened over the past couple of years. There are so many, the pandemic, etc., etc., etc. But what we've seen is that the external influences are having a significant impact on the progress of oil and gas companies in terms of their profitability, in terms of their resourcing requirements, and their general growth and expansion. On the positive side, it's leading to lots of opportunities in the industry right now. So there's opportunities to grow, to invest in new resources. And really, what you want to do is to try and level out the impact of this on your organization so that you're on a steady growth plan rather than the highs and lows generated by these external events that seem to be constantly hitting us, especially over the past 2 to 3 years. So one way of doing that is to introduce digital processes. Why would you do that? Well, it applies some standardization across your operations. and that standardization improves the predictability of outcomes. So as you're executing standardized processes, you get to know how successful that process is going to be. You get to know how long it's going to take. When should you expect it to be completed? When will those resources be freed up to work on the next process, the next project, etc. So introducing standardization helps you with predictability, so that you know how your resources are going to behave. You also can implement controls to contain risk. So part of the risk in your organization is the risk of your operations. And if those operations are being done in a standardized way, you can then also force control on those operations to ensure that people are not breaking away from standard process. And you can monitor those processes in real time, so you can see at any point in time where anomalies are occurring, where tasks are taking a little bit too long, or where a process breaks off and it's not completed. And you can see that very quickly. So you're doing that through implementing controls using digital processes. At the end of the day, a key success factor for those controls is adoption. So you have to get your digital processes adopted by the organization to make sure that you're gaining all the benefits, and that you're able to monitor those processes, the execution of those processes in real time. Digital processes brings you flexibility because you can change those processes very easily. So as environmental factors impact your organization, you can quickly change things to ensure that you're running at the optimum efficiency within your organization. Digital processes allow you to record work anywhere. So as you're carrying out different steps in a process, you might be on a site, and you can actually record that on your mobile device, for example. A big concern of people who introduce digital process automation, particularly a product like FlowForma, where it's no code, the business can actually define the process themselves, is how can that be governed? Like a lot of IT managers I speak to are very worried about things like shadow IT. Well, is FlowForma shadow IT? The answer is yes and no. I mean, you're ultimately giving people tools to enable them to become self-sufficient, enable them to improve their processes and situation. But you also want to put guardrails and governance in place so that they don't risk breaking processes or breaking by overusing resources, for example. And you're able to do this using a governance application where a gatekeeper, typically in IT, can actually control production environments and give sandboxes to people to allow them to be creative, to actually digitize processes themselves using a no-code tool. But then when they want to put it into production, they have to go through a gate so that basically IT can say, yes, that's okay, that's good to go. We can put that into production for you right away. But they control that. They can decide whether it's ready for the big time or not. So in terms of, you see a lot of buzzwords, let's say, or systems out there that are topical at the moment, that are considered to be quite important. But at the end of the day, any organization can only invest in certain tools and technologies. And each of these tools and technologies give a certain return on investment. So let's have a look at some of the tools that are on this sheet now. So for example, RPA. RPA is fantastic. Robotic process automation is a fantastic tool for certain things. It's very good at high volume transaction processing, where the transactions are predictable, and it allows you to go into allows you to put those transactions into a system automatically. It can be very, very useful, but it has a limited scope. So you're going to get a certain return on investment, but it has a limited scope. Other areas like IoT, again, for certain things, it has its advantages, but not for all, and it's a limited scope. But one of the things I would say is that process automation is something that can actually span across all of these things, that can drive real benefits within your organization. So you should consider process automation as something that's really easy to implement and has wide scaling benefits across the entire organization, unlike some of the other options that are on the screen at the moment. So if we consider that as process automation being the fastest route to digitalization, being the fastest route to return on investment, um, what does that look like in terms of a system? It's a system basically that combines three things together: a workflow, that's the execution of tasks by people together to create uh, uh, to achieve business goals. Also, it includes document generation and communication management, so that those communications are automatic between the different actors or people involved in the process, and forms for data collection, so that you're gathering information as you go along, information that's relevant to the task at hand and relevant to the business goal. And what we find is that everybody can relate to that. But what people often don't know is that digital processes can be digitized in weeks. So we'll talk about a use case in a moment where they had built processes that took years to develop, and ultimately with digital process automation, it can be digitized in a matter of weeks. It says here weeks, not months on this presentation slide, but I can tell you that sometimes the alternative is years. And at the end of the day, you can start seeing ROI within 6 weeks of onboarding, 6 weeks of getting started. It allows you to work across departments and across divisions within your organization, and it supports mobile processes. Everybody these days is accessing a process on a mobile device, whether it's the tablet or whether it's the phone. At the end of the day, when you implement this solution, you're gathering the data that's relative to the process at hand, to the business goals that are being achieved, and you're improving the quality of that data and the visibility across the organization of where those processes are at any point in time. People often like to say, well, what does that look like? Having difficulty visualizing it. And this is just some sample screenshots. We don't have time for a full demonstration today. There's some sample screenshots of what a digital process looks like. And what you can see is that across the top of those screens, there's a series of boxes. They represent steps in a process. These are tasks that are being done by people. And the area below that then is a digital form, and that's capturing all the data that's relevant to that task. Now, in the examples here, you'll see that it's capturing a table of information and including photographs, because you have to be able to capture many different types of information. It's all relevant to the particular step, the particular task at hand, and the person that's actually carrying out that task at this precise point in time. As you move through the different steps in the process, the data that's being collected changes, because all that data is relevant to that particular step right now. It's relevant to you as you're doing the job. And it's accessible, whether it's on the desktop or whether it's on a mobile device. You're seeing the same view no matter where you go. Even when the process is very different and the data is very different, its interface, if you like, is the same. And that really facilitates adoption within the workforce so that you can quickly learn how to use new processes. And that supports digitization at scale, which is the real goal here, because digitizing a single process in your organization is all very well. But if you want to really make significant benefits, you need to digitize at scale. Think about 2, 3, 4, 50, 100 processes that you want to digitize. So what areas can process automation help within your business? Well, these are just some examples. So for example, we have clients who work using FlowForma to manage their fleet of vehicles. And it can be everything from vehicle onboarding, new vehicles coming into the field, and new assets coming into the field, and then the ongoing maintenance of those assets as well. The system also allows you to reach out to external people. So it's not just the people inside your organization, but your suppliers, your clients, and so on, can interact with the system just like anybody else. They can complete a step in the process, and it allows you to smooth the interactions between those actors in the process. So whether they're employees working inside your workforce, whether they're contractors who are essentially suppliers outside of your workforce, or whether they're people within your supply chain, or indeed your clients, they can all participate in the processes, and the system can provide them with the same kind of benefits. I'm just going to throw in site visit management there because it's a very small example, but something that especially in oil and gas is used very, very often. It's very quick and easy to get going with site visit management because it's such a basic process. but yet there are simple controls, and it allows you to put controls in place to ensure that all those site visits are done in a compliant way. One of our most popular processes across all of our industries is incident management. Why? Because it needs to be done at the time, at the place where the incident occurred. And having that mobile functionality allows you to do all that. You can record a lot of detail on the incident and then process it through a workflow to maybe assign some kappa actions to ensure that the incident doesn't occur in the future. One of the things about digital process automation system is it inherently provides you with a full audit trail. So our system does that. It allows you to see who and when every task was done. So who did every task and when it was done, when it started, when it was completed, and so on, and what actions occurred during the execution of the task. And this really helps when it comes to regulatory compliance, and because you have that full audit trail to back up all of your activities to show that actually all these processes were executed correctly in accordance with the corporate standards, and it was done in this time frame, etc. Something that we do quite a lot with our clients is purchase requisition, capital expenditures, and so on. And why? Because digital process automation allows you to put in the business rules to ensure that the purchase requisition always goes through the right channels, so that it can handle varying levels of approval, basically based on the size, let's say, of the purchase requisition. So this purchase requisition is something that naturally fits in very well with FlowForma. And also we can work with upstream and downstream processes. So regardless of whether you as an oil and gas company are upstream or whether you're downstream, from our perspective, it's essentially the same. And you can design the processes that you need for your particular environment. Another very frequent use case that we deal with is preventative maintenance tracking, so that you can basically execute scheduled checks, for example, on assets to ensure that they are being complied with. We have companies who use it for things like meter validation to ensure that all their metering equipment is actually complying with standards and is performing as expected. So this is something that is the use cases carried out quite often by our customer base. So if I just sum up really what I said in those use case examples, we basically have the system monitors progress and performance across teams. So the system is automatically monitoring all of that for you. So you can see at any point in time where all your processes are and what has happened in the past, what's most likely to happen in the future. It's gathering an audit trail as you move along. It also allows you to be agile, because the processes that you build are typically built by your own people who are actually executing those processes, and they are able to change those processes, tweak them, and do that really quickly and easily. And they can tweak them, pass them out to the people using the processes to be validated, to check that actually they're usable within the workplace, and tweak them to make sure that they're adopted by the workers. It supports self-regulation because it's basically doing the auditing all of your activities the way you want to do it. Okay, so that's really important. The processes that you build, we can provide you with template processes, of course, but the processes that you build are really designed for your workforce to work your way, to adopt your best practice, and to ensure that that best practice is executed every time. So it really supports that idea of self-regulation, which is beneficial in lots of different ways, including making the whole organization run more predictably, which is really helping with resilience. All the data that you enter into a process, including all the data and all the steps, and that's all gathered centrally. So you're automatically capturing that data, and you're automatically capturing task performance metrics. Now, that information is really useful because it's very pertinent to the business goals that you are achieving by executing the processes. It's putting all that data in a very distinct, valuable context. So if you look at things like IoT devices, for example, we talked a little bit about them earlier on, the data from those devices has to be churned and interpreted, and somehow you're going to get some value out of that, right? But with FlowForma, all that data that's captured during the execution of processes, it's all really relevant to business goals. And it's quite high value data that you're capturing. It's all captured centrally, and it's all available for near real-time reporting. At the end of the day, the process that you're executing, we talked a little bit about visibility there. By default, information that you capture in FlowForma is visible to everybody in the process. But you can restrict that down, you can lock it down. And ultimately, getting access to that data, you have to go through 2 levels of security to get access to the information. So the system is basically making it a process visible to different people inside the organization, but in a secure way. So there's always a security layer that has to be gone through to ensure that the information is not inadvertently passed on to somebody else. By going through an electronic form and a digital process, you're improving the quality of your work. And this is something that's come back to us from our customer base, that FlowForma really helped to improve quality. And the interesting side effect of that is by improving the quality of your work, you're also generating a better relationship with your customer. So many of our clients have noted that there's been a significant drop, for example, in customer complaints after implementing FlowForma to take control of customer-facing processes. And this is a significant side benefit, if you like, of implementing FlowForma. One of the big things, and we've talked about it already, is that you can use FlowForma to drive those processes inside your organization. And this increases your efficiency, making best use of your resources, time, and ensuring that you're using them to the maximum capacity, which is so important in the area of the resource constraints that we currently have in the marketplace. So we're going to talk a little bit now about one of our case studies, Dresser National Gas. They're a leading provider of measurement piping and instrumentation solutions based in Texas, USA. And they had a challenge where they were migrating legacy document processes that were key to the company's engineering operations. So they were actually, as far as I remember, they became an independent company. And at this point in time, they decided to review all their processes and to try and, in a very short time frame, digitize as many of those processes as possible. So some of the processes that they successfully did were engineering documentation approval, patient disclosure submission form, IT change management, equipment and software request, and customer complaints form. But they digitized these processes in a very short time frame. The very first process was digitized inside 30 days, and that's 30 days from starting from scratch to actually deploying it and having it used by people in the business. And this was a real significant game changer for them, because previously it took them so long to digitize the process that, you know what, it was something that they didn't even want to change, didn't want to think about it. It was so painful originally that they didn't want to think about change at all. And now they were able to get something live from scratch within 30 days and tweak that process to ensure it was adopted. It was a whole new way of working for them. And it really drove some impetus in the business for change. And once the first few processes were delivered, the snowball started rolling and they were able to digitize more and more processes at scale. And every single one of those processes was monitored and tracked by the system, and they were able to identify the savings directly that they were getting from the implementation of each process. And one of the things they did was they saved 15% of the time of the document controller. Why? Because all the documents were now managed by business processes, and she was communicated to as and when she needed to be, etc. So she was able to measure that it was saving her 15% of her time, freeing her up for other work. And through the same mechanism, they were able to measure cost savings and efficiency, and they were able to continuously improve the workflow. So they hadn't been able to do this in the past. Why? Because it took so long to actually build the workflow solution in the first place using traditional tools, that changing that process was very, very difficult. So they were now able to change it really easily using a no-code configuration tool. And they got that big side benefit of gathering all that information, gathering all that data. And through that gathering of data, they were able to make better decisions. At the end of the day, and everybody understands this now, that analytics is now so important to us, and we need to have the data to enable us to carry out those analytics and actually make better decisions going forward. Okay, so what at this point in time, I'd like to just drop out to some Q&A. So what we'll do is just bear with me a moment and I'll check to see for our questions and answers. Okay, so the first question is, says this sounds a lot like shadow IT, and how do you control it? Well, one of the things is that, yes, in some respects, you're absolutely right. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get those business people to actually build out the systems for you. And that's indeed the case. But FlowForma allows you to apply controls so that you are not adversely impacting production environments. So when you give people access to the tool, you can get them trained up. The training cycle is approximately 2 days. And after that, they're ready to go. They can start innovating. They can start building out their digital processes. But once they're ready, once they've interacted with the end users who are actually using the processes, once they're happy that the processes are being tested and will be adopted, they can then request to have those promoted into production. And that request can go through IT, so that IT basically can carry out some due diligence to ensure that the processes are ready for the big time, and then very easily promote those processes into a production environment. The next question I have is, how do you get started with all this? Well, that's a very good question. So there's a number of aspects to this. First of all, how do you deploy FlowForma as a tool? Well, it's very easy. It installs inside Microsoft 365. You can just install it from the store, and it automatically, if you like, is set up in a contained environment. What do I mean by that? It's contained within your Office 365. In fact, it stores all of its information in SharePoint Online, so that as you're executing the business processes, it's capturing all the task detail, all the data, all the documents, etc., all stored securely in SharePoint. And that's quite important, because to access FlowForma, you're accessing it via your Microsoft 365 or SharePoint login, and through SharePoint, you're getting access to FlowForma. Also, FlowForma is storing all that data inside your domain, inside your Microsoft 365 environment. Now, the system can also, by the way, store that information in Azure SQL for reporting, if that's what you require, just for information. But once you have installed the application, we provide you with a support service to get started. So we have a service called SureStart. It's included with your license, that allows you to basically, we handhold you to building out your first process. So all you need to start off with is to have some understanding of your process, some documentation and so on. And we will help you on that first process to help you build it out inside our no-code environment. And then once you've gone through that SureStart process, you're able then to maintain it going forward. You have all the skills and so on required to actually maintain it, and also to build out new processes yourself. Now, we focus on helping you do things yourself, so that we focus on helping you to get started, helping you to actually build out your own solutions. But we also provide services as well, should you need them, should you rather we build them for you and so on. But our whole mantra is, if you like, it's helping you to help yourself. So we try and ensure that you do that through a SureStart process. And the next question I've got is, can you integrate with any system? Well, FlowForma supports integration using a variety of different mechanisms. So, for example, you can integrate with a SQL database and use the SQL database as a staging area. Many of our clients do that, particularly if they have lots of different third-party systems that they want to integrate with. They can use a SQL database as an interim staging area, so that, for example, master data may come from SAP, it may come from different solutions out there, and then FlowForma just references that information held in SQL, so that you have a consistent set of data across all your different systems. And we also integrate using other mechanisms too. So, for example, REST APIs or SOAP APIs, and we have a no-code interface to allow you to integrate with any system that supports REST or SOAP APIs. We'd also support integration via things like Microsoft Logic Apps, where you might want to integrate to more than 500 different cloud applications and on-premise systems supported by Logic Apps and Microsoft Gateway. So we can support that mechanism as well. In fact, some people often ask us, well, can you integrate to on-premise systems? Yes, we absolutely can. Using an exposed REST API, for example, or using a Microsoft Gateway, we could integrate into those on-premise environments. We have lots of companies, particularly in the energy sector, who integrate FlowForma with those on-premise backends. So another question is, how do you prioritize processes? Right, so basically, I assume that would relate to the priority of processes. Let's say you have lots of different processes in your organization that need to be digitized. How do you actually prioritize the ones that are being digitized? I'm assuming that's the right interpretation of that. And the way we look at it is that when you're starting off, we would focus on a couple of things. We'd focus on a process that does not require integration. And why? Because it's really, really quick to digitize if you're not using integration. So go for the process that's going to be easy and quick to digitize, right? And then what we do is we'd look at processes that actually involve a number of different users. So rather than just having one, let's say, small user group of the process, try and find a process that's actually used by a large number of people. Why? Because we're going to have a higher impact if you do it that way. So we find what's really successful is that if you digitize the first process quickly as possible and start showing benefits as quickly as possible, this really impresses people. And basically, that's what you want to get kicked off. You want a solution that's going to impress people. So go for a process that's relatively easy to digitize, that impacts a wide as audience as possible. Get that one up and running as quickly as you can. And then look for feedback. So seek feedback from your audience and find out what they like, what they don't like, and so on. And what we find is that if you get up and running quickly, you'll get a lot of positive impact from that. And that positive impact can be used then to drive further change in the organization. So you can use that bit of momentum to actually digitize the next one, the next one, the next one, and start rolling it out on a wider basis, right, to affect significant change within the organization. The other thing I've been asked is SharePoint Online a mandatory, is SharePoint Online a mandatory thing? And yes, it is. We currently do require you to have Microsoft 365 and SharePoint Online. It is something that's used as a database. And as I said earlier on, it's also used for authentication. And the upside of this is that you're using a system that you already have, if you like, as a basis. And then FlowForma is just sitting on top of that, so that you've already, if you like, approved and so on the use of Azure Active Directory, for example, in the background. So we find that this is a great platform to run on. And it's also very useful in that it stores a large array of different types of content. And FlowForma works with all of this content. Interestingly, FlowForma is constantly under development. So we were launched back in 2016. And since then, we've issued out quarterly releases, introducing new features into the product. So one of the things that we do, which you may find of interest, is that we listen to our customer base. We listen very closely, and any new requirements for new features that are presented, we will always consider those and release them in one of our quarterly releases if we find them to be of general value. So we're always issuing quarterly releases with new features of functionality to support our customer base. So I think that's something that's quite significant. It's quite different in many ways to the way many IT vendors would work. We are very much a vendor that actually listens to our customer base and is driven by our customer base, at the requirements of our customer base in terms of our product features. Okay, and with that, I think we're out of questions.
Yeah, yeah, Paul. Thank you so much for the such an insightful information. And it was really a wonderful presentation. And thank you so much for answering all the questions. So I suggest all the audience to connect directly with speakers via one-on-one meeting. And also, I suggest all the audience to visit our title sponsors booth so that you can have some views on their collaterals. So thank you so much, Paul, for being with us. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you very much.